The instant I entered the vehicle, my grandson abruptly covered my mouth, whispering, "Don't utter a single word, Grandma. Are they privy to our conversation?" I heeded his plea, and what I then uncovered was a revelation so staggering it left me utterly undone. "I'm pleased you've joined me. Please remain until the conclusion and inform me which city you are observing this account from. I am eager to learn the extent of its reach." I emerged into the parking expanse. Darkness had already fully descended. My aging sedan rested silently in a deserted alcove. The dim illumination from the lamppost cast a reflection upon the film of dust coating the windscreen. As I reached for the door, preparing to enter, a frigid hand suddenly clasped over my mouth. My heart commenced a frantic rhythm. A tremor of dread coursed through my being. I longed to cry out, but a quavering voice breathed into my ear. "Remain silent. Are they listening to us?" I turned, my pulse racing, and beheld Liam, my grandchild, concealed in the rear seating area. His eyes were wide, glinting in the gloom, brimming with apprehension. Liam was scarcely 10 years of age, yet his countenance at that precise moment seemed unnatural, far too mature, as though he had witnessed something deeply horrifying. I closed the door soundlessly, my hands still unsteady, striving to maintain composure lest I amplify his distress. "What are you doing here? You gave me the fright of my life," I murmured, my voice choked with shock. Liam tilted his head and gestured with a finger towards the windows of the office edifice. On the uppermost levels, a few lights persisted, casting a jaundiced glow reminiscent of vigilant eyes. I held my breath, following the trajectory of his digit, my thoughts a tangled skein. "I overheard Mother and Miss Jenkins in the office. Were they discussing you?" Liam articulated so softly I had to incline my head closer to discern his words. "What were they saying about me?" I inquired discreetly, endeavoring to project an air of calmness, though my heart hammered with considerable force. Liam clasped my hand with surprising strength, his cool, small fingers gripping me as if I were poised to vanish. "Mother said that in a few days you would possess nothing, that she would compel you to affix your signature to something, and then you would cease to exist within this household." Liam's pronouncement struck me like a blade piercing my heart. I became rigid, as if the very earth beneath me had fractured. Bethany, my daughter-in-law, whom I had cherished as if she were my own offspring, was orchestrating a scheme against me. I yearned to scream, to race to the building and confront them. Yet observing Liam's fearful gaze, I comprehended the futility of impulsive action. The boy was trembling, and I sensed his terror so acutely that it felt as though the encroaching darkness itself was engulfing me entirely. It was then that the realization dawned. The afternoon's meeting had been a meticulously staged ruse. Bethany, with her saccharine smile and honeyed tone, had been present. She always addressed me as Mom with such evident affection that one could easily perceive its sincerity. But on this day, she relentlessly pressed the matter of signing a power of attorney, as though it were an utterly commonplace request. "Mom, it's merely some paperwork to facilitate smoother business operations," she had stated, her eyes luminous, yet icy. I offered a nod, though a disquiet settled deep within me. There was an undercurrent in her voice that sent a chill down my spine, as if each word had been carefully chosen to conceal an ulterior motive. Sarah Jenkins, my confidant of so many years, sat beside Bethany, her head bobbing in agreement. This left me profoundly unsettled. Sarah, whom I had regarded as a friend, who understood better than anyone the immense effort I had invested in establishing Vance Industries, was endorsing Bethany's agenda without reservation. "Mrs. Vance, this presents an excellent opportunity for you to indulge in some rest," she had remarked, averting my gaze, her eyes fixed upon the table as if concealing a truth. I felt ensnared in a web, a plot I could not yet fully comprehend. Mr. Harrison, the family legal counsel, was also in attendance. I had always placed my trust in him, yet today his demeanor was peculiar. He avoided direct eye contact and repeatedly shuffled through documents, seemingly attempting to mask his discomposure. When I directly questioned him regarding a specific stipulation within the power of attorney, he faltered and swiftly diverted the conversation. A seed of suspicion began to germinate within me, like a small, sharp wave breaching my chest. Suddenly my thoughts turned to Andrew, my son. He had been working remotely for several months, entrusting the entirety of the company's affairs to Bethany and Sarah. A sense of unease had settled upon me, prompting me to assume the bulk of the workload myself. Each day, I prolonged my presence at the office, meticulously reviewing financial records, poring over every contract to ensure all remained within acceptable parameters. However, this relentless effort took a toll on my well-being. My head throbbed, my vision blurred from insufficient sleep, and my heart felt burdened by a profound sense of isolation. Andrew was my source of pride, but now he seemed excessively detached, leaving me to confront my escalating doubts alone. Abruptly, a shadow glided across the parking area, its measured footsteps echoing in the profound silence. Liam swiftly ducked, pulling me down to emulate his action. I remained equally silent. My heart pounded. My gaze remained fixed upon the figure until it entirely vanished. When all sound ceased, Liam raised his head, his countenance ashen. "Mother observed me," he articulated, his voice quivering. "She instructed me to confide in no one. But I am so terribly frightened, Grandma." Hearing these words, my heart contracted. I embraced Liam with a fierce grip, feeling his small frame shudder against me. "It's all right. I am here with you," I soothed, though I was uncertain whether my intention was to comfort him or myself. Bethany, to whom I had confided my innermost thoughts, whom I had believed would be a pillar of support for Andrew and Liam, was orchestrating a scheme to divest me of the very home I had painstakingly constructed with my sweat and tears. The anguish was overwhelming, stemming not only from the egregious betrayal, but also from the dawning realization that I had placed too much faith in others, that I had willfully ignored all cautionary signs. My mobile device, nestled within my handbag, vibrated, its screen illuminating with Sarah's name. I was about to respond when Liam snatched the phone from my grasp and promptly deactivated it. "Don't answer it, Grandma," he implored, his voice laced with desperation. "Mother stated that she is observing everything." I met Liam's gaze where sincerity and terror intertwined. I offered a nod and placed the phone aside, my heart heavy with foreboding. Sarah, whom I had considered family, was also complicit in this nefarious plot. I ignited the engine and navigated the vehicle away from the parking lot, my mind a tumultuous vortex. "If you return home with me at this juncture, Mother will discover everything," Liam confided, his voice brimming with distress. "Do not return for now." I observed him, sensing his innate intelligence and courage despite his tender years. I altered the course of the vehicle, steering directly towards the outskirts, a considerable distance from the office illumination and the watchful eyes that observed our every move. During the journey, I attempted to maintain an outward appearance of composure. However, internally, a tempest raged. I had dedicated my existence to nurturing this family, to safeguarding Andrew and Liam. Yet, it was precisely those closest to me who were now turning their backs. The pain stemmed not only from their perfidy, but also from the profound loneliness, as if I were stranded in an abyss, uncertain whom to trust. I brought the vehicle to a halt on a deserted road on the periphery, where the streetlights offered only a meager illumination of the path ahead. A modest eatery, nestled discreetly behind a cluster of trees, emitted a warm amber luminescence from its windows, a beacon of refuge amidst the internal storm I was enduring. I took Liam's hand, and we entered, feeling his small fingers interlace with mine in a tight grasp, as if he feared I might dissipate if he relinquished his hold. I ordered him a mug of steaming cocoa, and for myself, a simple, bitter black coffee, hoping it might help me remain alert. However, the truth was my head was reeling, and my heart ached from the narrative Liam had just imparted. Liam positioned himself very close to me. The aged wooden chair emitted a creak with every subtle shift of the child's posture. He continually gazed out of the window with his large, inquisitive eyes, as if anticipating a figure to emerge from the darkness. I gently placed my hand upon his shoulder and murmured, "Liam, do not be afraid. It is merely you and I present here." Yet even I was uncertain whether I was offering solace to him or to myself. That persistent sensation of unease clung to me like an ineluctable shadow. I lowered my voice to a near whisper. "What did you overhear? Recount every detail, every specific." Liam lowered his head. His small hands tightly gripped the hem of his shirt, and he articulated, "They referred to you as foolish, that you would endorse all documents without perusing them, that subsequently everything would belong to them." Those pronouncements felt like another sharp jab to my heart. Bethany, my daughter-in-law, whom I had treated with the affection of a daughter, had privately deemed me intellectually deficient. I had devoted my entire existence to the establishment of this enterprise, to providing a secure home for Andrew and Liam, and she believed me to be so credulous as to relinquish it all by my own volition. I endeavored to maintain my composure, though my heart ached profoundly. "Are you certain?" I inquired, my voice faltering, though I hoped Liam would not detect my apprehension. The child nodded, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Mother even shared a laugh with Ms. Jenkins. She stated that you would be left with absolutely nothing thereafter." His words were akin to a frigid gust of wind against my skin. I envisioned Bethany and Sarah within the office, deriding my predicament, and the acrid taste of betrayal flooded my mouth, much like the coffee before me. I had placed my trust in Bethany. I had envisioned her as the successor to my legacy, the custodian of our family's future. But now, she was plotting to seize everything from me, even the very roof I had erected through my own considerable efforts. A shiver traced its way down my spine, yet I maintained a serene facade. I did not wish for Liam to perceive his grandmother as weak. I did not desire him to believe I lacked the fortitude to protect him. "I understand," I responded, my voice soft yet resolute. "Do not be concerned. I shall devise a solution." Liam regarded me with a mixture of doubt and hopeful expectation, as if he yearned to believe in my capacity to rectify all. However, the fear still emanated from him. Suddenly, the cafe's entrance creaked open, and a man entered. He was clad in a dark overcoat. He surveyed the surroundings and paused at our table before settling at a nearby alcove. Liam immediately lowered his head, clutching my sleeve tightly as if seeking to become invisible. I felt his fear, and my heart began to race erratically. I scrutinized the man closely and recognized him as David Miller, the former security personnel who had been employed at Vance Industries for an extended period. He had consistently demonstrated reliability, his calm smile gracing the entryway, but his presence now filled me with a sense of disquiet. "Mr. Vance, David approached and stated in a resonant baritone, "It has been a considerable time since we last met. How have you been faring?" I responded with a strained smile. "Quite well, thank you." However, internally, I was assailed by a multitude of doubts. Was his appearance here at this precise moment merely a coincidence, or was it also a component of a larger stratagem that remained elusive to me? Liam subtly lifted his head, observed him, and whispered to me, "I trust him. He used to safeguard you." His pronouncement caused me to pause. Liam, despite his youth, possessed a perceptiveness that far surpassed my expectations. Perhaps he was correct. David had proven his loyalty, and at this juncture, I required an individual in whom I could place my complete confidence. I offered a slight nod and turned my attention back to David, lowering my voice. "Mr. Miller, I require your assistance. Please escort Liam and me to our residence discreetly. No one must be aware. They are observing our movements." David regarded me with a serious expression and responded with unwavering resolve. "Understood, Mrs. Vance. I shall attend to it." He posed no further inquiries, which afforded me a peculiar sense of relief. In an era where I no longer knew whom to trust, his silence offered an unexpected solace. On our return journey, David navigated through a labyrinth of side streets, gradually distancing ourselves from the city's nocturnal glow. Liam remained seated beside me, resuming his account in a trembling voice. Mother also declared that if I ever divulged anything, she would vanish, and I would be left entirely alone. The child's eyes brimmed with tears, and I felt as though my heart were being constricted. Bethany not only had me in her sights, but had also dared to threaten Liam, the grandson I adored above all else. I drew him close, pressing him against my chest, and whispered, "You are exceptionally courageous. I shall not vanish. Therefore, do not harbor any anxieties. I give you my word." Yet deep within, I recognized the precariousness of that pledge. I had no clear understanding of how I could possibly shield Liam when I myself felt adrift in this bewildering predicament. As the vehicle approached our neighborhood, David abruptly decelerated, his gaze sharpening as he peered into the rearview mirror. "Mrs. Vance, there is an unusual vehicle parked a short distance from the entrance. Its lights are still illuminated." A shiver traversed my entire frame. I glanced out of the window and observed the faint radiance of that vehicle, resembling a predatory eye lurking in the darkness. "We shall not proceed home," I declared, my voice firm, though internally I was in turmoil. "Convey us to Martha's residence." David offered a decisive nod. He maneuvered the steering wheel in a different direction, and I experienced a fleeting sense of liberation as that mysterious vehicle receded into the distance. Martha, my lifelong companion, opened the door, her expression one of surprise at encountering Liam and me there in the depths of the night. "Eleanor, what is amiss? Why are you here at this hour?" she inquired, her voice laced with concern. I merely shook my head. I guided Liam to the intimate sitting area and whispered, "Martha, maintain strict secrecy regarding this. I shall divulge the entirety of the matter to you at a later juncture." She acquiesced without further interrogation, and I recognized that I had sought refuge with an individual in whom I could place unwavering trust. As Martha proceeded to prepare tea, Liam drew me to sit beside him and articulated in a quivering tone, "Grandma, Mother intends to have you sign. Do not affix your signature to anything." The child's pronouncement sounded as much a warning as a desperate plea. I embraced him tightly and nodded. "I am aware. I shall exercise caution." Yet inwardly I repeated to myself, "This is merely the prelude. and I am uncertain if I shall possess the fortitude to confront what lies ahead. I implored David to return Liam home first, to avoid arousing Bethany's suspicions. If she were to observe him returning in my company, she would undoubtedly deduce that something was amiss. David offered a confirming nod. He escorted the child while I remained at Martha's abode, reclining on the aged sofa, my gaze fixed upon the ceiling. Sleep eluded me that night. Liam's words reverberated in my mind, interwoven with the image of Bethany's placid smile, Sarah's averted gaze, and Mr. Harrison's tense expression as he shuffled through documents. I had meticulously constructed this family with all the love and dedication I possessed, yet now I felt like a solitary pawn on a chessboard, utterly unaware of the game's intricate rules. The following morning, I returned home at an early hour, as the nascent sunlight began to dispel the lingering mist. My footsteps felt heavy, as if each was burdened by an invisible apprehension. I pushed the door inward and entered the sitting room, whereupon Bethany immediately appeared, bearing a tray laden with steaming tea. Her smile was radiant, yet I could discern the palpable falsity radiating from every contour of her countenance. "Mom, where were you yesterday? I attempted to reach you numerous times, but you did not respond," she articulated in a voice as sweet as nectar. Yet her eyes, cold and piercing, meticulously analyzed my every reaction. I compelled myself to maintain an outward semblance of calm, though internally a maelstrom was churning. "I visited a friend's residence and simply remained there for the night," I responded, my voice maintaining an even tone, as if the matter held no significance. Yet within my mind, Liam's words continued to resound, detailing Bethany and Sarah's elaborate scheme to sever me from my own kin. The pain was acute, not stemming from a fear of financial loss or corporate forfeiture, but from the profound betrayal by an individual I had embraced as a daughter. I had opened my heart to welcome Bethany into my home. I had diligently instructed her, step by step, in the intricacies of managing the business, and now she stood before me with a disingenuous smile, as if her intention had never been to orchestrate my downfall. Bethany lowered her gaze, then resumed her smile. "You should have simply informed me, Mom. I was exceedingly concerned." Her words carried the tone of a gentle admonishment, yet I recognized them as mere artifice. I observed her in silence, attempting to decipher her every gesture. At that juncture, Sarah emerged from the kitchen, a notepad in her hand, her eyes red, as if from weeping. She swiftly regained her professional composure and stated in a measured tone, "Mrs. Vance, you have an appointment with the legal counsel today regarding certain transfer documents." I offered a nod, feigning indifference, but my gaze remained fixed upon the notepad. Its cerulean cover appeared incongruous. It bore no resemblance to any of the company's official files. A premonition surged through me, causing my heart to pound erratically, just as Bethany turned to place the tea tray upon the table. I seized the opportune moment and discreetly dropped my handkerchief near where Sarah was standing. I slowly bent down to retrieve it, managing to catch a fleeting glimpse of the notepad's contents. Amidst the scribbled notes, I discerned the words, "Power of attorney, urgent signature." My heart lurched. Sarah, whom I had so deeply trusted, was privy to a secret that held the potential to utterly ruin me. I straightened up, a forced smile gracing my lips, but inwardly the acrid taste of betrayal seared through me. I had treated Sarah as one of my own. I had shared the company's tribulations with her, and now she stood aligned with Bethany, participating in a conspiracy to cast me into oblivion. At midday, Bethany presented a meticulously prepared repast. The aromas emanating from the dishes were exquisite. golden tortillas, beef simmered with an array of spices. The entire domicile was imbued with familiar, comforting scents, yet I managed only a few bites before detecting a faint, unmistakable fragrance, that of the sedatives my mother had once consumed to induce sleep. My heart began to race, but I maintained a placid expression and offered a few words of commendation. "Bethany, your culinary skills are exceptional." I then excused myself, citing fatigue, and retired to my chamber. As I passed Bethany, I observed her eyes tracking my movements, her expression one of calculation regarding the quantity I had consumed. Suspicion deepened within me. I could not betray any outward sign. The moment I secured the door, Liam entered through the small rear casement window, which I habitually kept slightly ajar for ventilation. He whispered, his voice trembling, "Grandma." Mother introduced something into the food. I observed her while she was preparing the meal, pour a peculiar powder from a folded piece of paper. His words confirmed my most profound anxieties. I offered a gentle nod, placing my hand upon his shoulder. "I understand, my dear, but do not utter a word. Do you comprehend? Leave it to me." However, gazing into his large, frightened eyes, I apprehended that his apprehension extended beyond me, encompassing his own welfare as well. His mother, Bethany, had stooped to the extreme of intimidating her own son to achieve her objectives. The pain throbbed like an exposed wound, exacerbated not only by Bethany's perfidy, but also by the agonizing realization that Liam, my cherished grandson, was ensnared between an abhorrent truth and insidious falsehoods. As twilight descended, I contacted David and requested him to maintain vigilance for any unusual vehicles in the vicinity of the residence. His deep voice resonated through the telephone line. "Mrs. Vance, a black sedan was observed last night, parked a short distance from the entryway. The vehicle's lights remain illuminated, but I have not witnessed any individual entering or exiting." A shiver coursed through my body. Who was observing me? Was it Bethany, Sarah, or an individual yet unknown to me? I urged David to remain alert, and the pervading sense of unease clung to me like an indelible shadow. That night, sleep proved elusive. Reclining in my bed, I detected a faint sound emanating from the garden. I cautiously rose, drew back the window drapery, and peered downward. Beneath the faint moonlight, I observed Sarah standing alone, her mobile device in hand, her voice fractured. "My daughter, I must do this, lest she perish." She wept as she murmured, as if imploring someone. My heart pounded forcefully, though not from fear, but from a complex confluence of fury and compassion. Was Sarah, whom I had entrusted with my confidence, being coerced? Or was she merely engaging in pretense, akin to Bethany? I retreated, my mind awhirl, unable to fully grasp the unfolding events. However, I committed that detail to memory, determined to investigate further at the earliest opportunity. At dawn, while the streets remained deserted, I utilized the pretext of visiting the grocer to depart the domicile. However, instead of proceeding to my customary destination, I silently shadowed Sarah. I observed her enter St. Jude's Hospital with hurried steps, as if evading pursuit. I waited for approximately 30 minutes, parked in a concealed corner, my gaze unwavering from the entrance. When Sarah emerged, her countenance was pale, and her eyes were swollen, indicative of recent weeping. A sharp pang pierced my chest, not solely due to my suspicion of her, but because, on a deeper level, I still harbored a desire to believe she was not intentionally betraying me. However, subsequent to Liam's revelation, I could not permit sentiment to supersede rational thought. The truth was paramount. I entered the hospital, feigning a search for an acquaintance, to approach the information desk. The young receptionist, with a polite smile, consulted the records upon my mentioning Sarah's name. She had an appointment in pediatric cardiology last week for a young girl, she stated in a neutral tone. I acknowledged the statement with a slight inclination of my head, a heavy sensation settling in my core. Was Sarah's child genuinely unwell, or was this whole situation orchestrated? I offered an apology, citing the need for a moment alone, and promptly exited towards the parking area, my thoughts in disarray. The instant I opened my vehicle's door, my mobile device buzzed. A notification from an unidentified source materialized on the display. Papers will require your endorsement shortly. Failure to comply will result in a child's demise on the surgical table. My heart seized, as if doused in freezing water. I scanned the message repeatedly, seeking any indication, but found only a stark, unyielding menace. I did not reply. With a quivering hand, I simply saved the communication. Who was orchestrating this complex web? Bethany, Sarah, or an unseen player? My mind immediately conjured Liam's terrified expression, a sight that fractured my very being. How could a maternal figure like Bethany leverage her own offspring for coercion? Upon my return, Bethany stood waiting at the threshold, as if anticipating my exact arrival time. Mom, where have you been? I tried reaching you multiple times, but you were unresponsive, she inquired, her tone saccharine, yet her eyes held a piercing intensity. I managed a weak smile. Just a quick trip for some health supplements. Bethany nodded, her smile unwavering. That's excellent. Your well-being is paramount. Yet, from the upper window, Liam's gaze, etched with deep distress, met mine. I offered him a subtle acknowledgement, a silent reassurance. Internally, however, I knew I was navigating a perilous precipice. Later that afternoon, Mr. Harrison, the legal counsel, contacted me. His voice, strained, seemed to read from a pre-written statement. Mrs. Vance, we must arrange a meeting to finalize the investment power of attorney at your earliest convenience. A faint background murmur suggested another presence. I responded tersely. I will make the necessary arrangements, and ended the call, my spirits dampened. Bethany now held sway over everything, from Sarah to Mr. Harrison, and was progressively tightening her grip. I accessed my phone, intending to contact Andrew, hoping for a moment of paternal reason. But before I could initiate the call, Bethany materialized behind me. He's occupied with a conference call, Mom. He won't be able to take your call right now. I'll relay your message later, she stated, her voice soft but charged with unspoken implications. I simply nodded. Deactivating my phone, I felt utterly confined within my own residence. Retreating to my private chamber, I secured the door, and moments later, Liam, like a fleeting specter, emerged through the window. He presented me with a creased document, whispering, "Grandma, I retrieved this from the refuse bin. Mom discarded it this morning." Unfolding the paper, my heart faltered. It was a duplicate of an agreement for property conveyance, with my signature space clearly marked and the date of execution mere days away. A chill coursed through me as the realization dawned that my time was rapidly diminishing. "You were incredibly resourceful, my dear," I told Liam, striving for composure despite the chasm of dread within. Bethany's objective extended beyond mere corporate acquisition. She aimed to eradicate my very presence within this family. In the depths of the night, illuminated by moonlight, I heard delicate tapping at my door. Sarah stood there, her eyes inflamed, her countenance drawn. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but Bethany's voice, sharp as ice, echoed from downstairs. "Sarah, Descend at once." Sarah flinched, recoiled, and murmured, "My apologies, Grandma." She departed swiftly, as if evading discovery. I watched her exit, a tempest of indignation and empathy swirling within me. Was Sarah acting under duress, or was this a calculated deception? Immediately thereafter, my phone vibrated again, another anonymous communication. A final reminder, sign, or the child is lost. Surely you do not wish an innocent to bear the consequences of your actions. I glanced at Liam slumbering deeply in an armchair, his features serene. A profound ache seized me. Bethany had the audacity to involve Liam in this scheme, utilizing my grandson as leverage to break me. Her cruelty was beyond my wildest imaginings. The anguish was overwhelming, a consequence not only of betrayal, but of my own misplaced trust in my family. I promptly contacted Andrew. This time, unexpectedly, he answered. "Mom, is everything all right?" he inquired distractedly, as if preoccupied. I attempted to articulate the entire situation: Bethany, Sarah, the menacing messages. But Andrew cut me off. "Mom, just do as Bethany suggests. I trust her completely to manage matters. You're letting your imagination run wild." His words were a searing wound to my spirit. Andrew, the son I had cherished and shielded my entire life, was now aligning himself with the architect of my downfall. I terminated the call, tears threatening to spill, but I held them back. I could not afford the luxury of weakness, not when Liam depended on me. That night, I lay awake, my gaze fixed on the ceiling, my mind in a whirl. I recalled the years my husband and I had dedicated to building this enterprise, the sacrifices made, from sleepless nights to contentious negotiations, all to safeguard this family, all while holding my infant son. Now I felt like an intruder in my own home. Bethany had assumed control of Sarah, Mr. Harrison, and even Andrew, and by extension, me. At 65 years of age, I was confronting the betrayal of my closest loved ones entirely alone. I clenched my fists, resolving that delay was no longer an option. Tomorrow, I would expose everything. Yet a profound certainty lingered. I was treading a perilous path, fighting not merely for the company, but for Liam, for the fragile hope of this family. The sting of betrayal remained, a raw, burning ache, but I would not succumb. For Liam, I would find the strength. The following morning, as dawn painted the sky, I ventured into the garden, seeking solace in the fresh air for my agitated mind. Within moments, I spotted Sarah near the rose bush I had planted when Andrew was a child. She was engaged in a hushed, trembling conversation. "Please grant me a little more time. I will procure the funds, I promise." I froze, not from eavesdropping, but from the sheer desperation in her voice, a plea for her very survival. Her gaze met mine, her face draining of color as she abruptly ended the call, her hands shaking. "Mrs. Vance," she stammered, her eyes wide with apprehension. She took a step back, as if anticipating an interrogation. I offered a gentle nod, forcing a smile that masked my inner turmoil. A pang of sorrow struck me. Sarah, who had been my confidant and right hand at the firm, now recoiled from me like a cornered creature. Was she truly coerced, or was this another performance? Doubt gnawed at me, but a deeper instinct urged me to believe she hadn't betrayed me intentionally. I had always viewed her as a daughter, a partner through the company's most trying times. Witnessing her fear, compassion welled up. Suddenly Bethany emerged from the house, her arm encircling Sarah's shoulders with a show of affection. "Mom, the paperwork is prepared. All that's required is your signature," she announced, her voice laced with a disarming sweetness, her smile radiant yet frigid. "Don't fret. It's merely routine documentation. Sarah's complexion paled further, her hands clenching as if restraining herself. I forced a confident facade. Inside, I felt like I was navigating a minefield. Every word, every glance from Bethany was a chilling reminder that the daughter-in-law I had once held dear now sought my expulsion from my own family. The pain of betrayal was compounded by the realization that I had been willfully blind, affording her the opportunity to orchestrate this entire charade. Seeking a glass of water in the kitchen, Liam discreetly steered me to a shadowed alcove. "Last night I overheard Mom threatening Miss Jenkins," he whispered, his voice quivering. "If she doesn't comply, her daughter will face repercussions." Liam's words struck me like an electrical jolt. I looked at him, his large eyes reflecting fear and a nascent resolve. "Are you certain?" I managed, my voice barely audible. Liam nodded with conviction. I heard it clearly. Mom said she would disappear, and Miss Jenkins's daughter would never be found. My heart hammered against my ribs, not only from his statement, but from the chilling understanding that Bethany's malice extended beyond me, now encompassing Sarah's child as a means of manipulation. The hurt was profound, a raw wound, not solely from Bethany's treachery, but from witnessing my own grandson observe his mother's descent into cruelty. At midday, Sarah presented me with a glass of warm milk. She placed it on the table, avoiding my gaze, standing in silent anticipation. I barely touched it, feigning a sip before discreetly pouring the remainder into a nearby plant. The faint, familiar scent of a sedative still lingered, and I dared not risk it. Sarah remained motionless for a moment, then murmured, so softly I strained to hear, "I am truly sorry, Mrs. Vance." She then hastily retreated, as if her prolonged presence might betray her secret. Her apology pierced my heart. The conviction grew that Bethany held her captive, yet the remorse in her voice tore at me. She was once the person I trusted implicitly, now ensnared in a scheme I still struggled to comprehend. That night, moonlight streaming through the window, I heard hushed footsteps in the corridor. Liam, his face etched with fear, crept into my bedroom. "Grandma, I saw Miss Jenkins weeping in the hallway. She said her daughter is close to death." He clung to me, his small frame trembling. My heart ached. Sarah, whom I had considered family, was now living in unspeakable dread, and I was powerless to assist her at that moment. My pain stemmed not only from Bethany's perfidy, but from the devastating realization that I had inadvertently driven Sarah into this predicament through my naive trust in my daughter-in-law and my willful ignorance of the unfolding events. I held Liam tightly. "I will handle everything. Do not be afraid." Yet within, I knew an insurmountable obstacle lay before me. I resolved that at first light, I would return to St. Jude's Hospital to verify the truth, to ascertain if Sarah's daughter was indeed gravely ill, or if it was another of Bethany's elaborate deceptions. As Liam succumbed to sleep in my arms, I gazed upon his innocent face, a new determination solidifying within me. I could not permit Bethany to continue her manipulation of this family, not just for my own sake, but for Liam, for Sarah, and for the home I had devoted my entire existence to building. The following morning, as dawn barely illuminated the deserted streets, I instructed David to drive Liam and me to St. Jude's Hospital. I offered a fabricated reason of a routine medical checkup, but deep down, I knew I was entering a conflict. Liam sat beside me, his small hands clasped, his gaze conveying concern yet striving for composure. I placed my hand on his shoulder, whispering, "Do not be afraid, sweetie. I simply need to confirm a few details. My own heart, however, pounded relentlessly, each beat a stark reminder of the dwindling time. Bethany, with her disingenuous smile and veiled threats, was closing in, and I desperately needed the truth before it was too late. At the hospital's records department, I sought out Clara, a retired nurse who had been acquainted with my mother many years prior. Clara, her silver hair framing a kind smile, recognized me instantly. "Eleanor, it has been an age. Are you here for a checkup?" she inquired, her voice warm with affection. I returned her smile, endeavoring to maintain an air of normalcy. "I need to verify some information regarding a young girl named Vance, Sarah's daughter, my assistant." Clara nodded. She accessed the digital files, but after a few moments, a frown creased her brow. "This is peculiar. This child is not listed as a cardiology patient. The file was created only recently, and it simply indicates a common cold." Clara's revelation struck me with the force of a lightning bolt, dispelling the confusion that had clouded my mind. A glimmer of hope flickered, yet my suspicions intensified. If Sarah's daughter was not seriously ill, why the palpable fear, the tears, the compliance with Bethany? I requested Clara to provide a detailed review of the child's cardiology history. Silently, she printed several pages. As I scanned them, my breath hitched. Numerous doctors' signatures appeared as indistinct scrawls, and the official stamps were blurred, suggesting a hasty forgery. Clutching the papers, I struggled to keep my voice steady. "Clara, please keep this confidential." She nodded, her expression troubled. "Be cautious. It appears these records were tampered with externally. I will create additional copies for you." I expressed my gratitude, but an internal storm had been unleashed. Bethany was not only threatening me, but had also fabricated documentation to manipulate Sarah. The pain was overwhelming, a consequence not only of my daughter-in-law's betrayal, but of Sarah's own entrapment in a web of deceit. Suddenly, Liam tugged gently at my sleeve and whispered, "Grandma, someone is observing us." I turned and saw a man in a dark coat seated nearby. He held a newspaper, but his eyes were fixed on us intently. My heart pounded in my chest. I felt like prey in a predator's gaze. David, positioned near the entrance, recognized the unease. He approached the man and sat at the adjacent table, his expression steely. The man in the coat grew visibly uncomfortable. He abruptly stood and departed, inadvertently dropping his newspaper. I exhaled, but the feeling of unease persisted. Who was orchestrating this elaborate deception? Bethany, or some other unseen antagonist? I squeezed Liam's hand and offered a reassuring smile, though inwardly I knew we were venturing into perilous territory. During our return journey, Liam, clutching the copies, inquired with a hesitant voice, "Grandma, is Miss Jenkins's daughter truly unwell?" I met his wide, earnest eyes, brimming with both apprehension and a touch of hope. "Perhaps," I replied gently, "but it is not as severe as they are portraying. I believe your mother exaggerated the situation to exert pressure on Sarah. Sarah is unaware. She is convinced her daughter is critically ill, which explains her unwavering obedience." My words quieted Liam, but I felt him grip my hand tighter, seeking reassurance. A lump formed in my throat as I contemplated Sarah, ensnared by a falsehood, and Liam, my dear grandson, forced to confront the truth of his own mother's manipulative nature. Upon reaching the gate, I observed Bethany awaiting us, her demeanor unusually placid. "Where have you been all morning, Mom?" I was concerned, she stated in a syrupy tone, her eyes scrutinizing me intently. I responded calmly, "I attended a medical consultation. I did not wish to trouble you." Liam, seeking refuge behind me, quickly added, "I accompanied Grandma. The doctor confirmed I am in excellent health. His innocent declaration, however, concealed a protective motive that deeply affected me. A 10-year-old boy whose primary concern should be studies and play was compelled to prevaricate to ensure his grandmother's safety. My anguish stemmed not only from Bethany's perfidy, but from the devastating realization that I had allowed Liam to become entangled in this maelstrom. Bethany took my hand, her gaze warm, yet chillingly distant. "Mom, you must prioritize your health to continue overseeing the company and the family." Her tone conveyed concern, but I felt as if a venomous serpent were coiling around me. I shivered, fighting to maintain my composure, and replied with a smile, "Thank you, dear. I will be diligent." As Bethany turned away, I watched her retreating back, the sensation of looking at a stranger, the daughter-in-law I had once cherished, the one I envisioned as a pillar of support for Andrew and Liam. Now, she was the very force attempting to plunge me into darkness. I recalled the days when I tutored Bethany in bookkeeping, the embrace I offered her at Andrew's wedding, all now rendered mere phantoms, shattered by betrayal. The day designated for the signing of the power of attorney finally arrived, and I felt as though I were stepping onto a battlefield for which I was entirely unprepared. I selected a gray dress, a color I typically chose when seeking serenity. That day, however, it only intensified my somber mood. My heart hammered as I descended to the boardroom, where every eye was fixed upon me. I remained uncertain how to confront Bethany, yet I knew with absolute clarity that inaction would lead to the disintegration of everything I had painstakingly built: the company, the family, and the very essence of trust. The ache of betrayal still burned within me, a wound that refused to staunch. Bethany, the daughter-in-law I had once held in high regard, was now the architect of my ouster from my own home. Within the boardroom, Bethany and Sarah were already seated, the table adorned with meticulously arranged documents, resembling a meticulously laid trap. Several key shareholders of Vance Industries were also present, their gazes a mixture of keen interest and palpable tension. Mr. Harrison, the legal counsel, occupied a corner of the table, his face taut, his hands clasped as if to suppress an inner turmoil. I met his gaze, remembering his youthful dedication to our family, and a sharp pain pierced my chest. How had matters devolved to this extent? How could those I had once placed my unwavering trust in now turn their backs on me? Bethany offered a saccharine smile, her voice as smooth as honey. "Mom, simply sign at the indicated spaces. Sarah and I have meticulously prepared everything. Andrew has also reviewed and approved it with his signature. All that remains is for you to affix yours to finalize the process." Her words, though cloaked in tenderness, were like a finely honed blade. She invoked Andrew's name, as if leveraging his authority to compel my compliance. I met her gaze, recognizing the chilling assurance that deeply wounded me. Andrew, the son for whom I had dedicated my entire life, was now under his wife's sway, and I was at a loss as to how to reclaim him. I took my seat. With trembling hands, I grasped the pen. Through the hallway window, I observed Liam standing, his large eyes fixed upon me. He appeared small and vulnerable, yet his gaze conveyed a resolute determination, as if urging me not to yield. I offered him a smile, attempting to convey reassurance, though I felt myself teetering on the edge of an abyss. The anonymous threats, the veiled warnings concerning Sarah's daughter, and even Andrew's evident distrust, all coalesced into a tempest threatening to engulf me in darkness. Just as I prepared to sign, Liam vanished from the window. My heart leaped into my throat. A wave of icy dread washed over me. "Where is Liam?" I demanded, my voice rising, betraying my burgeoning anguish. Bethany smiled, her tone gentle but laden with implicit meaning. "I had someone escort him outside to play so you could focus and sign without distraction." Her words were a thinly veiled threat, a chilling echo of that anonymous message concerning the potential loss of my grandson. My face contorted, though I fought to maintain my composure, my grip tightening on the pen. I harbored a profound fear for Liam's safety, a dread that Bethany might resort to harming her own son to achieve her objectives. At the very moment I was about to affix my signature, Sarah abruptly stood, her hand slamming onto the document, her eyes wide with palpable panic. "Please do not sign," she whispered, her voice quivering as if she had crossed an inviolable threshold. The boardroom was plunged into an unnerving silence, all eyes now fixed on her. Bethany's teeth clenched, her hand striking the table with a resounding thud, her voice cutting through the stillness like ice. "Sarah, what is the meaning of this?" I looked at Sarah. I saw her tremble. Her eyes conveyed a desperate plea, a mixture of guilt, profound desperation, and an unexpected courage that sent my heart racing. Sarah took a deep, steadying breath, as if summoning every ounce of her fortitude, and produced a small USB drive from her purse, placing it before me. "This recording contains everything. Please make use of it," she implored, her voice thick with emotion. Bethany let out a shriek and lunged, attempting to seize the drive, but David, positioned by the doorway, intervened instantly, restraining her with a firm grip. "That's sufficient, Mrs. Cooper," David bellowed, his fury evident, his hands shaking uncontrollably. I retrieved the drive and inserted it into the conference room computer, as Bethy's voice, now chillingly clear and devoid of warmth, echoed. An absolute hush fell over everyone. "She will have nothing once she signs. Sarah, if you betray me, your daughter will meet her demise." Those pronouncements struck like a visceral blow, impacting not only me but every soul present. The assembled shareholders began to murmur amongst themselves, their expressions shifting from astonishment to palpable indignation. Sarah dissolved into tears, collapsing to her knees before me, her sobs racking her frame. "Mrs. Vance, please, find it in your heart to forgive me. I had no other choice. She threatened my child. Gazing at her, I witnessed the profound anguish etched on her face, and within me, a tumultuous blend of fury and compassion surged. Sarah, a woman I had placed my trust in, had become ensnared in Bethy's deceitful machinations, yet she had found the fortitude to stand, albeit belatedly. I yearned to offer words of solace, but before my lips could part, the conference room door was violently thrown open. Liam burst in, his countenance pale yet resolute, flanked by Martha and several officers from the local constabulary. "Grandma," he cried, embracing me in a tight hug. Martha stepped forward, her gaze sharp and cold as she fixed it upon Bethany. I alerted the authorities the moment Liam recounted the entire affair. Bethany, in her desperation, began to shriek. "It's all a fabrication. Mother, please do not be swayed by him." She then turned her pleading eyes towards me, but I met her gaze directly, responding with somber gravity. "The truth, my dear, cannot remain concealed indefinitely. I have been aware of it for some time." My declaration left her visibly stunned, yet I felt no sense of triumph. Instead, a profound sadness washed over me, realizing that the daughter-in-law I had once held dear was now revealing her true, unvarnished nature. My thoughts turned to Andrew, contemplating the immense suffering my son would endure upon learning the full extent of this deception. I pictured Liam, my beloved grandson, forced to witness his own mother transform into a person of such cruelty. And then I thought of Sarah, who had summoned the courage to speak her truth, even at the potential cost of carrying that burden perpetually. As Officer Davis, his badge clearly bearing his name, stepped forward with a grave expression, the palpable tension in the room reached an almost unbearable crescendo. He ordered Bethany's immediate detention for questioning. She immediately began to resist, her cries escalating into a high-pitched wail. "This is all concocted. That memory stick is utterly false." Her features contorted, obliterating the sweet smile I had once known. She resembled a cornered animal, and despite my preparedness for this moment, my heart ached. This was not born of sympathy for Bethany, but from the poignant realization of all the years that had passed, of the moments I had held her close, believing she was destined to be an integral part of our family. Now, as I heard her wails, I recognized only a stranger, driven by insatiable avarice. I turned my attention to Sarah, observing her slumped in her chair, tears coursing down her cheeks. Her hands trembled, pressed tightly against her chest, as if attempting to contain something that was fragmenting into irreparable pieces. As the officers made preparations to escort Bethany away, Sarah abruptly stood, her voice quavering but imbued with a newfound determination. "Please, you must listen to me. I have to speak the truth." The entire chamber fell into an expectant silence, every eye now fixed upon her. I met Sarah's gaze, seeing the torment and pain swimming within them, and a knot tightened in my own chest. She, who had once been my most trusted confidant, now stood before me, trembling like a fragile leaf caught in a tempest. Sarah drew a deep, ragged breath, her voice catching. "Bethany provided me with funds on numerous occasions and explicitly threatened me to comply with her demands. I acquiesced because my daughter required urgent medical treatment. I truly did not wish for Mrs. Vance to lose everything she had worked for. But if I refused Bethany, my daughter's life would be forfeit." Her words were akin to a poisoned dart, aimed not only at me but also at her own conscience. I saw the tears streaming from her eyes and felt the sheer desperation woven into every syllable. Sarah had not only been coerced but was also trapped by an overwhelming terror, utterly convinced of her daughter's imminent peril. I longed to reach out, to embrace her, to assure her of my understanding, and that I bore her no ill will. Yet I found myself rooted to the spot, my own pain too profound, stemming not only from Bethy's betrayal, but also for Sarah, whom I had considered family, forced to endure such hardship in agonizing silence. Officer Davis diligently recorded her statement, but another officer, his expression skeptical, interjected. "What is the child's name? Where can we find her medical records?" Sarah responded immediately, her voice faltering. "The child's name is Sophia Jenkins." However, when pressed for the medical file, she faltered, her gaze becoming unfocused. I possess the documentation, but I left it at my residence." Bethany, despite David's firm grip, managed a sarcastic smirk and uttered mockingly, "She's fabricating all of this to shift blame onto me." That knowing smile from Bethany sent an icy chill down my spine. She maintained an air of unwavering confidence, as if certain Sarah lacked the concrete evidence to bring her down. I observed Sarah, her head bowed, her hands clasped together, and I sensed she was utterly consumed by confusion and guilt. Suddenly, Liam, my young grandson, stepped forward, his voice clear, though tinged with apprehension. I overheard my mother mentioning that Miss Jenkins's child was never admitted to any hospital. His words landed with the impact of a bombshell, plunging the room into an absolute deafening silence. I turned to Liam, noting the unwavering resolve in his eyes, despite the paleness of fear still lingering on his face. Bethany shrieked shrilly, "He is merely a child. He understands nothing. Do not heed his words." But her pronouncements had lost all their former potency. Sarah stood frozen, her eyes wide with disbelief, murmuring, "No, it cannot be." She recoiled as if struck by a physical blow to the chest. I saw the bewilderment dawn in her eyes, and my heart constricted once more. If Liam's account held any truth, then Sarah had been not only deceived by Bethany, but also a victim of her own consuming fears. Officer Davis immediately requested Sarah to furnish all pertinent documentation pertaining to her daughter. Sarah nodded, trembling, but in her eyes I perceived a profound sense of disorientation, as if she was only now beginning to grasp the possibility of having been ensnared in an elaborate deception. I intended to speak, to offer her comfort, but before I could utter a sound, the door to the room burst open once more. Andrew, my son, entered, his face a mask of exhaustion and strain. He had evidently just returned from a business expedition, his attire rumpled, suggesting he had come directly from the airport. I looked at my son, a flicker of hope igniting within me. I believed that Andrew, upon learning the truth, would stand by my side, understanding that Bethany had masterminded this entire charade. However, Andrew's gaze met mine, and in it I saw not compassion, but a deep disappointment. "Mother, why would you place credence in Liam's words? He is but a child. How can you accuse my wife based solely on a boy's testimony?" My son's words were delivered in a grave, yet reproachful tone. Bethany would never stoop to such actions. Andrew's pronouncement felt like a direct thrust to the heart. I stood frozen, the very ground beneath my feet seeming to crumble away. Andrew, the son to whom I had dedicated my entire existence, lavishing him with love and protection, now stood before me, casting doubt upon my judgment and defending the very wife who had betrayed our entire family. The pain was overwhelming, not merely from Bethy's deceit, but from Andrew's perceived abandonment, his choice to turn his back on his own mother. I met his eyes, striving to maintain composure, though tears threatened to spill. "Son, my sole intention was to safeguard this family, to protect both you and Liam. But can you not see? Bethany has deceived us all." Andrew merely shook his head, his eyes blazing with anger. "Mother, you are excessively suspicious. Bethany's sole concern is the welfare of the company, of this family." His words were another blow, more grievous, more agonizing than the last. I felt as though I was losing everything, not just the company, not merely trust, but also the son I held most dear. The atmosphere within the boardroom seemed to solidify into ice. Only Bethy's piercing screams could be heard, desperately attempting to shatter the prevailing silence. She clung to Andrew, tears streaming down her face, her voice trembling, yet undeniably theatrical. "Darling, I did this all for Sarah. Our daughter is gravely ill. I could not stand idly by and watch an innocent child perish." Bethany's performance was flawless, as if she were a genuine victim ensnared in a conspiracy against her will. Yet as I met her gaze, I perceived the artifice masked by her tears. My heart fractured. This was not the woman I had once cherished, the one I had envisioned as Andrew and Liam's steadfast support. She stood there, assuming the role of a victim to conceal her culpability. The ache of betrayal consumed me, not solely for Bethy's actions, but for my own failure to recognize her true nature, for allowing her into my family and thereby wounding those I loved most. Sarah sank back into her chair, her expression laden with self-recrimination, as if blaming herself for leading Bethany down this treacherous path. She remained silent, her head bowed, her trembling hands shielding her face. I yearned to approach her, to convey my understanding and assure her that I did not hold her accountable for being ensnared by fear. But before I could make a move, Liam, my youngest grandchild, stepped forward, holding a mobile device with an unusual air of determination. "I have something to share," he stated in a low, steady voice. Clara had, in fact, opened a message thread on Bethany's device, reading aloud a message. "If Sarah refuses to sign, her child will perish, just like the previous one." Liam's revelation was a thunderclap, plunging the room into an absolute, profound silence. All eyes turned to Bethany, who now appeared deathly pale. All vestiges of her earlier confidence vanished. Sarah lifted her head, her voice trembling as she inquired, The previous one? What precisely do you mean?" "My daughter was born perfectly healthy. She was merely frail in her initial days." "Why would you state such a thing?" Her voice cracked, as if a physical blow had struck her directly in the chest. I met Sarah's gaze, witnessing the confusion and agony swirling in her eyes, and my own heart felt as though it was shattering. Sarah, who had lived under the shadow of perpetual fear for her daughter, now confronted a truth far more terrifying than she could have ever conceived. Simultaneously, Mr. Harrison, the family's legal counsel, abruptly stood, an ancient medical file clutched in his hand, his face ashen, as if he feared implication in Bethany's impending arrest. "I can no longer maintain silence," he declared, his voice quivering. "This file conclusively demonstrates that Sarah's biological daughter succumbed mere hours after birth. On that very same day, within the hospital, another infant, an abandoned girl without any identification, was admitted." Mr. Harrison paused, drawing a deep, steadying breath, and then pointed directly at Bethany. "That child was your daughter, born to you and your paramour. You deliberately substituted her for Sarah's infant. You manufactured the narrative of a desperately ill child, requiring immediate intervention, to systematically manipulate Sarah. Sarah remained oblivious to this entire deceitful scheme throughout these years. It is for this reason she blindly followed your directives." Mr. Harrison's pronouncement resonated like an earthquake, leaving the room in a state of stunned, absolute silence. Bethany shrieked, her voice piercing. "Silence, Mr. Harrison. You are fabricating these assertions." But he remained unyielding, his eyes reflecting an unwavering resolve. "I possess irrefutable proof. All the evidence is contained herein." Sarah collapsed, covering her face, weeping uncontrollably, a tempest of pain and rage overwhelming her. "So, all these years I have been living a complete falsehood. I betrayed Mrs. Vance for a child who wasn't even mine." Her voice broke, as if her entire world had just imploded. I looked at her, witnessing an indescribable anguish in her eyes. My heart ached profoundly. She had not only been deceived but also coerced into perpetuating a monstrous error, all orchestrated by Bethy's wicked deception. Andrew stood immobile, his countenance shifting from astonishment to incandescent rage, and finally to utter devastation. His gaze faltered as he looked at Bethany, as if the revelation had suddenly illuminated the fact that the wife he had always trusted was nothing more than an elaborate sham. I longed to rush to my son's side, to embrace him, to reassure him of my unwavering presence and support. But I found myself paralyzed. The magnitude of the pain was overwhelming, not solely from Bethy's betrayal, but from Andrew's doubt, his choice to align himself with his wife over his own mother. I recalled the tender moments of his childhood, holding him in my arms and vowing to secure a brighter future for him. Now, he stood shattered by the truth, and I was at a loss for how to mend that profound wound. Cornered and exposed, Bethany erupted in a torrent of furious screams. Yes, she is my daughter, but I have no need for her. My sole desires are power and wealth. That confession stunned everyone in the chamber. Even the shareholders, whose primary concern was financial gain, regarded Bethany with unmitigated horror. I remained frozen, incapable of comprehending such profound cruelty, directed not only at Sarah but also at her own flesh and blood. They promptly handcuffed her, still struggling and shrieking, "You will all regret this. None of you will escape unscathed." But as the police led her away, all I felt was a desolate emptiness. There was no sense of victory, only an immense, crushing pain. For my daughter-in-law, whom I had once loved, had been reduced to nothing more than a stranger. Andrew turned towards me, his voice thick with emotion. "Mother, I am so sorry. I've been utterly blind. I allowed Bethany to manipulate me, and I even doubted your judgment." He moved towards me, embracing me tightly. I felt the tremor of his body in my arms. I enfolded him in my embrace, but remained silent. I wished to offer comfort, to assure him that everything would eventually be all right. But the words would not form. The pain lingered, not only from Bethy's treachery, but from the profound sense of isolation Andrew's doubt had inflicted upon me within my own family. I simply held him close, cherishing the warmth of my son, harboring the hope that time would eventually mend these deep wounds. Sarah, her face etched with sorrow, approached the police, presenting all the authentic evidence: the recording, screenshots of incriminating messages, and the fraudulent contract, her expression now resolute. "I made an error, but I will not permit her to ruin anyone else's life." I looked at her and detected a mixture of profound bravery and deep remorse, sensing her earnest desire for redemption. I placed my hand gently on her shoulder, nodding slightly, a silent acknowledgement of my understanding and my lack of blame. Sarah looked up at me, tears streaming down her face, and in her eyes I discerned a faint glimmer of hope. I then looked at Liam, Andrew, and Sarah, my heart heavy with the weight of recent events, yet simultaneously feeling a sense of profound relief. The brutal, unvarnished truth had finally come to light, and though it had inflicted deep scars, I recognized this moment as the crucial first step towards healing. Several weeks following that pivotal day in the boardroom, news reached me that Bethany had been formally indicted on charges of fraud, coercion, and conspiracy to unlawfully acquire assets. The police further reported the apprehension of her accomplice, a mysterious individual who frequented my residence in a black sedan, posing as a medical professional to facilitate the fabrication of incriminating documents. He confessed to his full complicity with Bethany in creating a fabricated medical history for the child and in dispatching the anonymous, threatening communications directed at me. Upon hearing this report, I sat in quiet contemplation within the living room, gazing out at the garden where the rose bushes continued to flourish. Yet, inwardly, I felt no sense of triumph. Instead, an overwhelming emptiness pervaded, as if a vital segment of my family had been irrevocably severed, and no force could ever mend what had been broken. Bethany, the daughter-in-law I had once loved, was now merely a name inscribed in a police dossier, a painful memory I wished to perpetually suppress. The court deemed Sarah an unwitting participant, coerced into compliance, but ultimately a victim of this elaborate, cruel deception. She received no custodial sentence, Yet I knew the burden of guilt would remain with her indefinitely. My thoughts drifted back to past years, recalling Sarah as a vibrant, enthusiastic young woman who had consistently offered unwavering support during the company's most challenging periods. She had indeed betrayed me, but not out of ambition. Rather, it stemmed from her profound fear and love for the daughter she believed was hers. I harbored no blame towards her, yet every recollection of those events sent a tremor through my heart, a pain not only of betrayal, but also of my own failure to prevent her from falling into such a dire predicament, ensnared within Bethy's insidious web. A few months subsequent to the sentencing, I made the decision to accompany Liam to visit Sarah. I felt compelled to see her, to understand how she was coping in the aftermath of such profound trauma. Upon our arrival, Sarah was in a modest apartment, cradling a young child. The little girl possessed large eyes, remarkably similar to Liam's when he was younger, and an innocent smile that deeply resonated with me. Sarah appeared visibly fatigued, her face gaunt, but a faint yet sincere smile graced her lips as she recognized me. "The child bears no culpability," she stated, her voice choked with emotion. "Even if she is Bethany's biological child, I have nurtured her with all the love I possess. One need not give birth to truly be a mother." Sarah's words struck a chord, bringing a sting of tears to my eyes. I gently placed my hand on her shoulder, nodding in understanding. "I comprehend, Sarah. You are a genuine mother." Sarah looked up, her eyes glistening with tears. "You still place your trust in me, despite everything I have done." I met her gaze directly, my voice low but firm. "Mistakes can be rectified. The crucial element is that you possess the courage to reveal the truth." My affirmation caused Sarah to break down in tears, but I observed a nascent spark in her eyes, as if a considerable burden had finally been lifted. Liam, standing beside me, suddenly ran forward and embraced Sarah's legs, whispering, "You saved Grandma. You saved me and my dad, too." His words caught in my throat. Liam, barely 10 years of age, had already grasped the profound significance of courage and the power of forgiveness. I hugged him close, feeling the comforting warmth of his small frame. In that moment, I knew that hope for this family was not extinguished. I resolved to provide Sarah with legal assistance to secure official custody of the child, thereby severing any remaining ties to Bethany. This was the least I could do, not only to atone for my own moments of doubt, but also to afford Sarah an opportunity to forge a new beginning. She deserved a life unburdened by deception. When I conveyed this intention to Sarah, she clasped my hand tightly, her voice trembling as she expressed, "Thank you, Mrs. Vance. I will forever be indebted for your kindness." I offered a simple smile, remaining silent, but within me, a sense of relief began to bloom, as if a portion of the wound was gradually healing. In due course, a semblance of tranquility gradually returned to my home. Liam became the source of my daily joy. Each morning he would bound into my room, exclaiming, "Grandma, have a wonderfully happy day." His smile was like a radiant sunbeam, dispelling the lingering shadows that still clouded my heart. Andrew, my son, commenced his tutelage in business matters under my guidance. He would sit attentively beside me in my office, diligently taking notes, posing insightful questions, and incrementally, I observed in him the maturity I had always anticipated. Andrew began receiving numerous invitations for collaborations from prospective business partners, and I felt confident that he would soon be prepared to assume the stewardship of Vance Industries in my stead. However, what resonated most profoundly were the sincere apologies reflected in his eyes. He spoke little, but each time our gazes met, his conveyed a silent plea. "Mom, I am truly sorry. I bore him no ill will, yet the sting of doubt from my own son lingered like an indelible scar. Sarah rejoined me in the workplace, this time as an individual granted a second chance. She applied herself with unwavering diligence, unburdened by her former insecurities. Little Sophia, Sarah's adopted daughter, was successfully enrolled in a nearby private educational institution. For the first time, I witnessed her beaming with unadulterated joy as she frolicked in the schoolyard with her peers. Observing this scene, I was deeply moved. Although Sophia was Bethany's biological daughter, she was nonetheless an integral part of this family, cherished and protected by those who had weathered the storm. During the annual company assembly, I rose to address the attendees, my voice solemn yet clear. Ultimately, family is defined not by shared bloodlines, but by those who demonstrate unwavering loyalty and protection during times of adversity. I directed my gaze towards the front row, where Liam, Sarah, and Andrew were seated. Liam offered me a broad, beaming smile and a cheerful wave. Sarah inclined her head, her eyes conveying profound gratitude. Andrew met my gaze, and for the first time in many months, I saw in his eyes not only remorse but also a palpable sense of pride. They all returned my smile, and in that precise moment I felt an immense lightness descend upon my heart. After enduring so many tempests, I had finally reclaimed my peace. Returning home, I settled into the living room, gazing out at the garden where the rose bushes continued their vibrant display. My thoughts drifted to the passage of years, to the days when my late husband and I painstakingly built this family, to the countless sleepless nights spent worrying about Andrew and Liam. Although circumstances had drastically altered, and though scars remained, I knew I had recovered the most precious elements: love and familial unity. A gentle smile graced my lips, a warmth spreading through me, and I assured myself that despite the inevitable challenges that lay ahead, I would never permit this family to fracture again. The narrative presented is a fictional account, though it draws inspiration from certain real-life events. Names and locations have been altered to safeguard the identities of those involved. This story is shared not for judgment, but with the earnest hope that it might resonate with someone, prompting reflection on the silent suffering endured by countless mothers within their own homes. I'm genuinely intrigued. If you found yourself in this predicament, how would you react? Would you opt for quiet to preserve harmony? Or would you summon the fortitude to confront all challenges and reclaim your say? I'm eager to hear your perspective, for every narrative serves as a beacon, illuminating a path for others. Divine favor is constant, and I hold a strong conviction that bravery guides us toward brighter futures. Should this tale resonate with you, your patronage through a super thanks would empower me to craft further narratives of this nature. My sincere gratitude in anticipation. And you? How would you navigate this individual's circumstances? I would be absolutely delighted to learn your insights, so please share them in the comment section. I'm perpetually keen to understand your viewpoints. Additionally, kindly inform me of the source from which you encountered this account. If you desire to immerse yourself in more life chronicles of this kind, bestow a like upon the video and become a subscriber to my channel. Numerous more await your discovery. Warmest regards, and until our next encounter.